So coming up this weekend is going to be a Bellator card taking place in Dublin, Ireland, which is the Bellator series that is running after being acquired by the PFL, if that makes any sense. But what does make sense is that there is going to be some PFL on Friday night, some Bellator on Saturday morning, and then also some UFC on Saturday as well. So there are three major promotions, three major cards on this weekend. So that is going to make for a massive weekend of MMA, and definitely a weekend that I am looking forward to. And I think that this card is going to be pretty good as well. And I have also predicted the PFL predictions. They should be up on the card should be up on my YouTube channel right now, as well as the UFC card as well. And with that being said as well, if you did want to support my channel in some way, the best way to do it is by signing up to the We Want Picks premium membership service, which is $10 per month. But if you sign up with my code ARTEM, you will be supporting my channel, and you can get a 3-day free trial as well by doing that. But for $10 per month, you do get a lot of value with that. You get, obviously, Jacob and Angelo's bets from We Want Picks, as well as a bunch of other stuff as well. A bunch of tools, like an AI is on there. My articles that I write every single week. There's also like a line movement tracker, so you can kind of see where the money is coming in on the events. Very much a lot going on there for $10 per month. And if you sign up using my code, you do support me. And that's kind of it. I'll see you guys in the predictions. As I usually do, I probably will get through the prelims relatively quickly, as they are usually made up of a bunch of prospect fights which are somewhat one-sided in the matchmaking. And I think that Darragh is actually a very big favourite, but this is probably the best opponent that he's actually had to fight in Mathias, who has a 7-1 record. Darragh has spent most of his professional career fighting for Bellator, and has definitely been built up by them against some pretty decent competition initially, but then after that I feel like the competition did decrease somewhat, and he even had one fight for Clan Wars, which is a promotion I believe based in England. But Darragh, he's a very big guy for 145 pounds, and for this matchup, he's actually going to be moving up to 155 pounds to take on someone called Mathias, who is also standing at 6 foot tall and is a pretty decent sized lightweight. Now, Mathias at one point was probably hailed as a really hyped up prospect, as this guy was finishing every single fight in the first or the second round, but then he went in there against this guy called Kawini Lopez, and you can actually watch this fight on YouTube, and it's a pretty fun fight. The way that you watch it is you do have to search up the name of the promotion, Jungle Strike Championship, and the whole main card is on there. This fight was actually really fun though. Mathias Poiron kind of showed what he was all about in the matchup. He is a very aggressive guy. I think his striking technique is very bad, and he does shoot for takedowns, which does explain why he does so many finishes on the ground. But after the first round, he completely gassed out, and although in the third round and even part of the fourth round, he actually hurt Lopez on the feet, he did ultimately just really gas out, and this is just how he lost the fight. I think his striking technique's very bad. He's kind of throwing punches, like not straight, like on awkward angles, and it's not like he's doing it intentionally like someone like Yuri Prochazka. It's just because he isn't the best striker in the world. Now, he probably won't have to worry about that too much against Darragh, as Kelly isn't really a striker. He definitely probably does want the fight to go down to the ground, and ultimately I think he should be able to beat Poiron. Now, upper weight class, Kelly might be the smaller guy here because he is, although the same height, has fought at 145 recently as well. I think that Poiron's going to gas no matter really what happens in the first round, so I'm going to go with Kelly to win by finish in the third round. I think that the grappling pace that Kelly can put on Poiron is going to be way too much for him to handle, so I'm going to give Kelly the submission prediction in round number 3 as Poiron completely gasses out. Now we have Savarjon Khamidov fighting against Marciley Alves, and Alves is a dangerous guy, man. I mean, he's only 24 years old, about to turn 25. Dangerous guy, and I believe this fight is at 135 pounds. Khamidov is, he's what you think he is. He's a very good prospect, man, and Bellator did very well, in my opinion, to pick him up, as I was actually kind of calling for the UFC to sign Khamidov for a very long time, and they have started to sign a lot of guys from Tajikistan, and he would have fit the roster perfectly. He beat a couple of pretty decent guys in different regional promotions. AMC Fight Night Global is a big time promotion in Russia. UAE Warriors is in the Middle East, and then he fought for Bellator and beat this guy called Jose Maria Tomei, who I believe at one point was a coach of Henry Cejudo, a grappling coach of Henry Cejudo, and even fought in the UFC. He was old though in that fight. Then he beat Kevin Petchy, who was a French prospect that I did rate relatively highly, and he looked very good in that matchup, ended up submitting him. Marciley Alves is dangerous, as I did say before, but he's a striker and not really much else. He does have an LFA fight against UFC fighter Luan Lacerda, who's a very talented grappler, and in that matchup, Luan Lacerda had none other than Jose Aldo in his corner, and for that reason, I actually thought that Jose Aldo was going to be in Luan Lacerda's corner when he fought against Cody Stamen. But Marciley Alves, shooter box guy, dangerous striker, gets a lot of KOs. I mean, he knocked out this guy called Gerald Hodge in his Bellator debut, but before that was knocking everyone out silly and mostly in the first round. Now, we have seen him have to deal with grappling before. He didn't deal with it that well against Luan Lacerda, who is a lights-out grappler, a much more different sort of style of grappler than Khamidov, as Khamidov is more of the typical takedown, ground and pound, pressure-heavy, dominant on top position kind of guys, and Lacerda is just like a pure kind of BJJ sort of style grappler, but I still think that I think Khamidov's good, man. He's minus 400 are the odds for this fight. I think he looks, I don't know if he's going to look minus 400, as there is a very real chance that Alves has success on the feet, but he's not going to have the takedown defense to deal with Khamidov, so I'm going to go with Khamidov to win by submission in that fight. Now we have Michelle Montague fighting against Karolina Sobek, and I believe Montague is a slight favorite in this fight. I think that she does beat Sobek. It is kind of a shame to see Sobek get thrown in the deep end quite a lot in her career, very early on into her career. As she was 3-0, I think, before 4-0 before the PFL signed her. And then she lost to Evelyn Martins, who was a girl that the PFL were trying to build up at the time. And then she lost to Aspen Ladd, who was like a former top 10 UFC fighter. So kind of a pretty tough little run that she has had in PFL, and I don't think it's going to stop, as Michelle Montague is also very good and is a great prospect from New Zealand. And if you didn't know, I'm from New Zealand, so kind of did know about her for a while. She was on the PFL's Dana White's Contender Series for a bit, and then got another win, and she's finding a lot of success using her grappling. Now, it is worth noting that Montague is pretty big for 145 pounds, and I think she probably will be bigger than Sobek. Sobek, I was somewhat impressed by her when I was doing tape study on her before her PFL debut, but I did think that she was very one-dimensional. She's very good at judo, and she is very dominant when she can get into a position, I believe it's called the scarf hold, and she has most of her wins come from this position, but that's kind of it. Like, her opponents at the time just didn't know how to deal with it. I think that Montague is going to be too good at grappling, even too good at striking, and just be bigger than her. She definitely is a woman's featherweight, Montague is, and I think that she's going to be bigger, and I probably can just kind of bully Sobek to a decision. So I like Montague here. She might actually find the finish, which a lot of people are predicting. Now, Nathan Kelly is going to be fighting against Jose Sanchez. Sanchez, he was brought in to lose to Khasan Magomedsharipov, and that's kind of what happened. And then since then, he's managed to win a couple more fights, which is impressive to me, but I just don't think Sanchez is going to beat Nathan Kelly. Nathan Kelly headlined a PFL Europe event recently. It might have actually been this one here when he beat this guy called Dimitri Salames, and then he fought on Bellator against Vikas Centrahil, who just wasn't that good, and he knocked him out. But I think it's just going to come down to grappling. And although Sanchez is fun to watch, he's okay. He's okay. But if you do really look through his record, he just has not beaten anyone really that good. And even then, if you do watch his fights, yeah. The PFL and the Bellator are really trying to build Nathan Kelly, though. He headlined this PFL Europe event. I don't really know why, but he did. There's something about Nathan Kelly, I guess, that maybe I don't know about. I think it is because he is definitely affiliated with McGregor through SBG Ireland. But yeah, I think Nathan Kelly's going to find a submission. I think he's a better grappler than Jose Sanchez, and ultimately that's just what it's going to come down to. And now Olena Kolesnyk's going to be fighting against Sarah Collins, and I believe this is my first underdog pick on the card. I really was going to pick against Kolesnyk, but I don't think I can. Now, stylistically, it's actually a pretty difficult fight for her, as Sarah Collins is going to want to dominate in the clinch against the cage and get takedowns with her judo. But Man, she's not very good at striking. To put it bluntly, um, that's the thing. I have had no sleep whatsoever, so there's just no filter on me whatsoever. Um, yeah, Sarah Cole, she's just nowhere near as good at striking as Kolesnyk. Now, that's the thing about Kolesnyk. If you watched her fight against Aspen Ladd, so you would think that she's probably the best striker on the planet. I mean, she absolutely pieced up Aspen Ladd throughout that fight. Ladd had no fight IQ whatsoever. And I watched Sarah Collins fight, and this one specifically against Pam Sorensen. And the way that she throws punches, man, like she's just kind of standing there and she's kind of throwing them over her head. Like I know it's an over, it's not as good. Kolesnyk's a good kickboxer. Now Kolesnyk has lost a lot in her career. She's got 6 losses. Most of those actually kind of come by being out wrestled and out grappled, but also by getting knocked out by Larissa Pacheco, who probably is the best women's fighter to ever step into the PFL octagon. It's not really too much shame in that, but I do think that Kolesnyk is the much better kickboxer in this matchup, and now Sarah Collins does have, in my opinion, a very obvious path to victory with the wrestling, with the grappling, with her background, and that is kind of how she does win her fights, is usually a lot of control time up against the cage and getting takedowns. But I think that Kolesnyk as well, she's pretty big for 145. She's going to be taller, she's going to be bigger, fought at 145 for a long time as well in the PFL. I do think that her striking is going to be good enough for Sarah Collins, but if you're putting money on this fight, I don't think I can help you, to be honest with you. Just don't bet this fight. Most people picking Collins. I like just don't bet this fight. Now Francesco Nuzzi is fighting against Shinobu Ota, and this is a very interesting signing from Bellator because Shinobu Ota, as you can tell, is from Japan and also has one of those very dominant wrestling backgrounds, which a lot of very good Japanese fighters do have, like Rinya Nakamura, like Rei Saruya. I guess in a way, Tatsuro Taira. Now, Tatsuro Taira doesn't really have the crazy wrestling background that someone like, and even Shin Haraguchi as well as an example. But the thing about Shinobu Uta was he did actually start his career in Ryzen against someone with 66 professional fights. Is that not a little bit crazy? I mean, damn, I know he had no MMA experience, and he fought Hideo Takuro, who at the time, 66 pro fights, and he did lose that fight in the grappling. Francesco Nuzzi is probably one of the better Italian prospects on the planet right now, and it's definitely kind of an MMA market that I feel like isn't really being explored by a lot of promotions. I feel like even the UFC could definitely make some big signings from Italy. But he's beaten Bernardo Sapai, and Bernardo Sapai is in the UFC right now and was looking really good against Vinicius Oliveira until he was on the receiving end of that flying knee because he gassed out. And that's the thing about Nuzzi, man, is on the feet, I mean, he's fighting a wrestler, so, I mean, Ota doesn't really have that striking experience that Nuzzi has. And Ota's also struggled in the past by obviously dominating in the wrestling, like someone like Shin Haraguchi has done, but putting himself in positions that leaves himself open to submissions. And Nuzzi does have a lot of experience in grappling. He's a very good BJJ guy. He's not going to be able to defend the takedown, so I think he probably will spend a lot of time on bottom underneath Ota. But I do think that we are going to see Nuzzi go out there and find a submission. I don't know if Bellator's actually signed Ota. I know that they're very close with Ryzen, so maybe he's kind of on loan from Ryzen for this fight. But even then, that doesn't really make that much sense. Bringing him over from Japan to Ireland. But yeah, I'm going to go with Nuzzi here. I'm going to go with him by submission. A lot of people picking him by decision, but I feel like if he's going... I don't think he's really going to be the minute winner, though, because I think Ota's going to look to wrestle, and he's going to look to wrestle a lot. That's how a lot of these Japanese freestyle wrestlers fight, is they dominate in wrestling and control, but they don't do that much damage. I think we're going to see Nuzzi kind of throw up a submission. Now, Simeon Powell's fighting Abdellah Er-Damy. Simeon Powell, as I kind of alluded to in the PFL video, looked really bad against Jacob Neto, in my opinion. He kind of fought against a guy that had the same amount of power as him, and he kind of just faded a lot, and he didn't really get any offense going, and that kind of made me think that Neto was like this absolute savage, you know, and then I picked him to beat Dovletsan Yagshimuradov, and then Dovletsan Yagshimuradov. Anyways, Simeon Powell's fighting against Abdellah Er-Damy. I do think he beats Abdellah Er-Damy. I mean, Er-Damy's good, but like he's not built like Simeon Powell. You know, he's got a lot of mass on him. Like if he lost a lot of mass, he could fight at 185 pounds. Simeon Powell couldn't fight at 185 pounds. And Er-Damy's dangerous. He's got a lot of finishes in the first round. He can wrestle, but he's very hittable, and he was kind of getting pieced up at times by this guy called Marciley Privilescu, and kind of had to make a little bit of a comeback KO. He's had a cancelled fight against Simeon Powell since then. They were meant to actually fight in the second round of PFL Europe last year, which has now been done here in Bellator. I think Simeon Powell knocks him out. Powell was a guy that the PFL put a lot of stock in. He disappointed them. He disappointed me. And then Neto disappointed me. I think Powell knocks out Rami, man. You don't really see this kind of athleticism at 205 pounds, especially at 6'5". I think Powell knocks him out. Rami eats right hands for breakfast, man. He just absolutely munches them. I think that we're going to see Powell knock him out with the right hand. And now Khasan Magomedsharipov is going to be fighting Tyler Mathison, and this is actually a step down in competition, in my opinion, because Khasan Magomedsharipov at one point was fighting decent guys. He beat Piotr Niedelecki, who's from Poland, and is pretty good, had a good fight against Richie Smellin. Then he beat a 7-4 Rafael Hudson, beat Sanchez, my boy Sanchez, and before that was just kind of being built up. But as you kind of maybe put things together, he is Zabit Magomedsharipov brother, younger brother, because he's only 23, and they do fight kind of similarly, and Khasan probably could be a guy that could really make a run in Bellator's rankings to be a champion potentially, or be a champion in the PFL or something like that. But they're being smart with him, they're building him up slowly. He's 23 years old, there's no real points to push him. Tyler Mathison's a wrestler. That's kind of it. And I did find it very interesting watching Tyler Mathison's fights, especially this one here against Pena Alamov, because I kind of just put 2 and 2 together and thought that this would stylistically be a similar fight. And Mathison, to my surprise, was actually the one initiating all of the wrestling against Alamov. He was shooting for the takedowns and was trying to get the takedowns going and get the grappling going. And he has fought since then, but he's been never mind. I was going to say he's been relatively inactive in his career, but he's not. He's actually been very active. But this fight against Alamov did surprise me a lot, because Alamov is kind of like Magomedsharipov, as if he's a big guy for this weight class at 145 pounds, and he's a wrestler. In fact, Alamov actually had a big-time prospect fight recently against a very good prospect from Cuba. Was it Cuba? That he lost again. He lost a fight recently, Alamov. But Alamov's a good wrestler, and he was initiating the takedowns there. Khasan's well-rounded, man. I mean, he's got good wrestling, he's got good grappling, he's got good striking. He's gonna be the better striker in the matchup, no doubt in my mind there. He can wrestle if he needs to. Mathison's gonna be the one shooting for the takedowns, man. So Khasan's takedown defense is gonna be tested, but once again, I think it's a step down in competition. I like Khasan to find a finish. Another one of these guys from Dagestan is going to be Kasumov fighting against Mathias Matos. And once again, Kasumov, he fights exactly how you would expect him to. I mean, there are a lot of these guys, man, fighting in promotions regionally in Russia, and the UFC doesn't really sign a lot of them. And I think Bellator was just kind of like, oh, the UFC's not signing them, we'll sign them. Yeah, so Kasumov made his debut against Josh Hill. Close fight, got the wrestling going for the most part, and Josh Hill was absolutely no scrub whatsoever. He's a very good fighter, and he was fighting for Khabib's promotion for a bit, and Brave CF, and a bunch of other regional shows. Guerrilla Fighting Club was actually Eagle before Khabib took over. Now, Mathias Matos, he's from Brazil. He trains with the Pitbull brothers, so he's going to be training alongside Patricky Pitbull and Patricio Pitbull. Patricky's fighting on the PFL card. And once again, he's a pretty dangerous guy. He actually has lost to Magomedov, who's very, very good. Probably is actually better than Kasum. And he was on the Ultimate Fighter. I was going to say, I opened up his Tapology for a reason, and it was because I wanted to bring up the fact that he was on Tough in 2015, but he has been relatively inactive in his career since then. Kasumov's going to be way bigger than him as well. It's definitely worth noting. I mean, he's not a massive guy for 135, but all of these guys, man, from these gyms and from Dagestan, they just have weight cutting on lock, man. Like, they're huge for the weight class. He's obviously a good wrestler. He's going to be a good enough wrestler to beat Matos. Do I think he finishes Matos? Probably not, just because he doesn't really have that very much aggressive sort of ground style to get the finish, but I think we just see Kasumov get the win. Now we have Norbert Navini Jr. fighting Dalton Rosta, and in my research for this one, I was a little bit mistaken about who Norbert Navini Jr. was. I thought that he was actually some sort of world wrestling champion, but it turns out his father was an Olympic gold medalist in wrestling and then actually become a actor. And Norbert Navini Jr. is not a wrestling world champion, but he is a grappling world champion. And it does make a lot of sense. Now, Dalton Rosto is actually a guy that the Bellator were building up for a long time, and he actually ran into a guy called Aaron Jeffrey and lost. And it wasn't a good performance, I'll be honest, from him, man. Like, especially in that third round, he kind of just, like, let himself get controlled by Jeffrey in, like, a really weird position where he was half attempting a takedown, half just waiting for the fight to be over. It was odd. But before that, though, Dalton Roster was a very hyped up prospect, and he has kind of all of the physicalities to be someone in MMA, especially 185 pounds, which is kind of a weight class which does sort of lack like lights out power strikers or lights out power wrestlers. I mean, I say that, and we've got guys coming up like Bonaco and Sharaput Magomedov, but if you ignore that, and Norbert anyway, he fights at 185, which is actually genuinely just a division that does lack a lot of very exciting prospects in general. And he's got all the physicalities to make it happen. I mean, this photo kind of does it justice. He is massive for the weight class. Took on this guy called Anthony Adams, showboated a lot on the feet, knocked out Ramiro Cotton, who's no joke of a wrestler himself, and then before that just beat a couple of guys. But Roster is a wrestler himself. He does shoot for takedowns. His striking's pretty good as well. And he does have a lot of very good coaching, I believe. His coach's name has slipped my mind, unfortunately, this deep into the video. But his coach is a very famous MMA coach. Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. Now we can move back to Norbert Navini Jr. He is a prospect, man. In fact, he's probably one of the biggest prospects there is right now. I mean, he trains alongside Michael Venom Page, so you know he's going to be getting some pretty good striking looks in there. And he does train with a lot of other pretty dangerous guys over there in England. As I said before, he was a grappling world champion. I believe he did that when he was competing in amateur MMA, and then Bellator took notice and took him on. He fought this guy called Anthony Manzolo, who, Andy Manzolo, I apologize, is a grappler like him, except not as good as him, and he just knocked him out. And then he beat Kamil Onichuk, who is a very dangerous striker, and he knocked him out on the feet. So he's obviously developed very dangerous striking, as well as that grappling, which he does possess. And I think in this matchup against Roster, he's going to have to defend takedowns. But even then, I feel like if he gets taken down, I think he might like half welcome the takedown because he is so dangerous on the ground. He's also dangerous on the feet. And I would almost say at this point as well, having that momentum against a guy like Roster who did mentally break in that fight against Aaron Jeffrey, I think is going to be massive. But maybe Roster could kind of turn that around and turn it into a positive to maybe be more motivated for this matchup. It's prospect v prospect. I think the prospect that does come out on top is Norbert Navini Jr. I'm going to go with a submission in this one here against Roster. I mean, the thing is about Aaron Jeffrey is he is a world-class MMA fighter. He is very, very good. So there's not really that much shame in losing to him. It's just kind of the way that he lost to him. He just didn't really... He just kind of just waited it out, really. It's a weird fight. And now we have Sinead Kavanagh versus Arlene Blencowe. I forgot to mention at the start, but I actually swept the last Bellator card I predicted. I didn't get a fight wrong that I predicted on that card. This fight here, if there's any fight on the card that is the reason why I can't do it again, it's this one. Or probably actually the Kolesnyk fight. To be fair. Oh, what is this, man? I actually I did a little bit of study for the fight, and I did come to the conclusion of Sinead Kavanagh, but that's kind of in the moment. I'm like, man, like this is a tough fight to pick because Arlene Blencowe is very good, but so is Sinead Kavanagh. They're both actually very dangerous strikers for this weight class. Sinead Kavanagh, her nickname's KO. She has knocked out a lot of girls, and so has Arlene Blencowe. In fact, Arlene Blencowe went a couple of tough fights with Chris Cyborg, did lose a second to a second round submission there, but then after that did fight 5 rounds. And then I thought that she kind of wilted a lot and didn't look very good against Sarah McMahon in her most recent performance. And I feel like that probably is a sign of her slowing down a lot. And then Sinead Kavanagh beat Leia McCourt, who I believe is going to be fighting against Chris Cyborg next, because Larissa Pacheco... No, she's going to be fighting against Pacheco next, I think. I could be mistaken on that. But Sinead Kavanagh turned away a very good prospect after getting knocked out by Chris Cyborg, and before that was knocking people out silly. In fact, got a KO in 34 seconds. Kavanagh's from Ireland. She's got the home crowd. I mean, Arlene Blencowe, I thought she looked a lot worse against McMahon than she had in her previous fight. She's now 41, taking another year off. Kavanagh just lost to Sarah Collins. I'm picking Sinead Kavanagh. We're going to move on to the co-main event. Paul Hughes is fighting against Bobby King. Paul Hughes, man, I mean, I feel like this is kind of just one of those situations where it's too perfect for Paul Hughes to win. He's just signed a massive contract with the PFL after being the biggest free agent on the planet at the time. And he was in talks apparently with the UFC, but the UFC just didn't offer him the same amount of money. And I think he wanted to fight super often, and for some reason I just think the UFC couldn't do what he wanted to do. So we're apparently going to see Paul Hughes fight 3 times this year for PFL or Bellator, and then fight in the $1 million tournament next year. So I'm very much excited to see that. And Paul Hughes is a pretty big deal, especially a big deal from Ireland. And he is now making his debut for Bellator in Ireland. And he dominated Jordan Vucenic in their rematch. Their first fight was a loss to Vucenic by split decision. That's his only loss. Smoked Vucenic in the rematch. In fact, he kind of just made it undeniable that they don't need to fight for a third time. And then he knocked out young Coy Huggins, and then he knocked out Fabiano Silva, and that actually win over Fabiano Silva isn't a bad win because he was meant to fight someone else, and then that fight got cancelled, and there was another fight as well that got cancelled as well before they ended up settling on Fabiano Silva. Anyway, that was a whole situation with Cage Warriors. I think he beats Bobby King, man. Bobby King's nearly 41 years old at this point. He's from Hawaii. He's a fun guy, man. He's a veteran of the sport at this point, and he is a tricky guy because he's so well-rounded and does have a lot of skills. He's dangerous on the feet, has done something similar before by turning away a dangerous prospect, because he turned away the prospect that was Aviv Ghazali, and Aviv Ghazali... I don't want to buy a pre-owned BMW at the moment, guys. Aviv Ghazali was super hyped up at the time, man. Minus 300 favorite, 91% people picked him to win. And I think Ghazali hasn't fought since, man, which is absolutely nuts. He retired one of the most hyped up prospects in Bellator history. And now he's got an opportunity to do that again against Hughes. But I think Hughes is just too good, man. At the end of the day, Hughes can grapple, he can wrestle, he's so fast on the feet. He's going to be faster than the nearly 41-year-old Bobby King, who is still tricky. I think Hughes wins, man. I think Hughes beats him. I think Hughes actually might win by KO. So, yeah, that's the pick. I'm picking Hughes. I think a lot of people are going to pick Hughes. It's like, shout out to Bobby King for taking the fight. It's in Ireland, man. The crowd's going to go absolutely crazy. And now we have Jason Jackson fighting against Ramazan Kuramagomedov. And I think Jason Jackson's minus 120, a slight favorite. I'm going to pick him to win. I really thought Amosov was going to beat Jackson, and beat him relatively easily. And Jackson's takedown defense in that fight looked so good, because you've got to consider this. The thing about Amosov is he was coming off a win. I mean, prior to that, I think he was fighting the war in Ukraine. But he come back and out-wrestled Logan Storley, who's a really good wrestler, and then couldn't out-wrestle Jason Jackson. And that just tells you how good Jason Jackson's takedown defense truly is. And now he's fighting Ramazan Kuramagomedov, who, as you can imagine, does fight similarly to Yaroslav Amosov, but in my opinion doesn't have the same sort of level of dynamic striking that Amosov has, and hasn't fought the same level of competition as Amosov either. Amosov was the champion and had defended the belt against other challengers. Ramazan Kuramagomedov is coming off a win over Randall Wallace, and Randall Wallace was just kind of fighting his way in the regional scene, I think trying to work his way into the UFC at the time, and he was fighting for Uriah Faber's A1 Combat. He had a beef with someone, Ozzy Alvarez, that's right, I remember this, because I was watching this fight here. I watched him beat Lewis Koske, the former UFC fighter Lewis Koske, and then him and Ozzy Alvarez kind of got, like, not in a scuffle, but like a verbal, like, disagreement after this fight. It was really kind of, I was like, man, like, I'm hyped to see the Ozzy Alvarez. Dude, I watch way too much MMA, way too much MMA to know about this situation. And then I was like, man, I'm hyped to see him fight Ozzy Alvarez. And then he fought for the LFA, and that's Ramazan. How do I know that? Like, that's, I watch way too much MMA, man. That's. But anyway, the thing is, like, Ramazan Kuramagomedov, he does what you expect him to do. And he knocked out Jaleel Willis in the first 90 seconds, but that's cool, mate. But you're not the first one to do that. In fact, I think 4 people have finished Jaleel Willis in the first round now. Just welcome to the club. Just welcome to the club, mate. And then Randall Wallace, Randall Wallace is good. He's actually better than his record does suggest, which is why I was kind of hyped to see him fight Ozzy Alvarez for no reason. And Yeah, like he's just not Jason Jackson, man. That's what it comes down to. Jason Jackson's a really good striker. He's going to be the way better striker in this matchup. Way more technical as well. Very talented Muay Thai sort of style. And he just knocked out Douglas. He didn't knock out Douglas Lima. What am I yapping about? I'm yapping. But he knocked out Yaroslav Amosov. And he absolutely smoked Ray Cooper the third as well. And that fight, I think, was like short notice at 185 pounds. And that PFL Champions versus Champions Series. Kind of a weird fight to make, considering Jackson was the champion and was coming off that win over Amosov, which just still kind of blows my mind as I think about it. But it's really just going to come down to the wrestling. Do you think Ramazan Kuramagomedov can get the takedowns on Jason Jackson? And more importantly, do you think he can keep it up for 5 rounds? I don't think so. I don't think he can keep up that wrestling 4-5 rounds against Jason Jackson. And at the end of the day, he's still going to have to deal with the much better striker that is Jason Jackson and also the power that is going to be coming back his way. Now, in hindsight, him not knocking out Douglas Lima does scare me because I thought he got the KO over Lima. But anyway, I think he's going to beat Ramazan Kuramagomedov. I think he's going to take that O like he did against Amosov, which is still just nuts to think about, man. It's also Killcliff versus Jackson Winks. It's a very fun sort of gym versus gym matchup. I like Jackson, though. Yeah, Jackson Wink, Jason Jackson. Yeah, that's confusing, man. Sorry, guys, I am tired, as I have said before. I'm in the middle of exams right now, and I'm just not operating off as much sleep as I definitely should be. But that's it for the Bellator card. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm pretty sure I just picked all favorites on that card, so hopefully all of the favorites win, unless Kolesnyk is the underdog, which I think she is, but that's not a very confident pick. We'll see how it goes. When I swept the Bellator card last time, I picked like 2 or 3 favorites, which kind of makes it a pretty good sweep. If this one here, I feel like a lot of the male fights I'm pretty confident in, and I'm not very confident in the women's MMA fight. So there's definitely parlays to be made. I'll make up a little article tonight, and I'll see you guys in the next one.